In the wake of natural disasters, fraudsters are on the prowl, looking to exploit the vulnerable.
The FBI urges people to research organizations before making a donation to avoid giving through cash, gift cards, or wire transfers.
At 5:42 a.m., the lights inside the Texas State Infrastructure Agency building were still off. The downtown complex stood silent beneath a cold morning sky. Only a few maintenance workers moved through the parking structure below the building. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual, but 3 blocks away, inside a temporary federal command center, dozens of agents were preparing for an operation that had been quietly building for nearly 11 months. Phones were secured. Operational maps were displayed. Federal supervisors reviewed final instructions. Every entrance to the government building had already been assigned. Every target had already been identified. At exactly 6 a.m., the order was given. Move in. Black SUVs surged through the empty streets as FBI agents and federal investigators surrounded the state agency headquarters from all sides. Within seconds, tactical teams entered the building. Security personnel inside appeared completely caught off guard. Several employees arriving for early shifts froze as agents moved through the lobby. Federal warrants were presented immediately. Entire floors were locked down. Computer systems were disconnected from the network. No one was allowed to leave. By sunrise, one of the largest corruption investigations in state history had officially become public. But investigators would later reveal that the operation did not begin inside the agency building. It began with a missing contract. 8 months earlier, federal auditors reviewing infrastructure spending noticed something unusual involving a highway reconstruction project outside San Antonio. According to state records, more than $48 million had already been approved for emergency transportation repairs. But when auditors reviewed the physical construction site, something didn't add up. The project barely existed. Only a small portion of the approved work had actually been completed. Most of the equipment listed in state payment records had never even arrived at the location. At first, investigators believed it might simply be accounting errors. Large infrastructure projects often involve delays and paperwork issues. But the deeper auditors looked, the stranger the records became. Several contractor payments had been routed through consulting firms that appeared to have no employees. Multiple invoices listed identical approval signatures, and millions of dollars had been transferred within hours of authorization. The federal review expanded immediately. Soon, FBI financial crime specialists joined the investigation. Within weeks, investigators uncovered something far larger than a single suspicious contract. Dozens of state-funded projects showed similar irregularities: road repairs, bridge inspections, emergency maintenance programs, technology upgrades. The same names kept appearing, the same contractors kept receiving approvals, and the same agency office kept authorizing the payments. Investigators quietly began reviewing years of financial records connected to the Texas State Infrastructure Agency. What they discovered stunned even veteran federal analysts. Over a 5-year period, more than $312 million had moved through a network of shell companies tied to public contracts. The money traveled through multiple consulting firms before disappearing into offshore financial accounts. Yet on paper, every transaction appeared legitimate. Every payment had documentation. Every approval carried official authorization codes. Someone inside the system understood exactly how government oversight worked. And they knew how to avoid triggering attention. Federal investigators gave the growing operation a code name: Blueprint. Because the corruption appeared built directly into the structure itself, the deeper agents looked, the more sophisticated the system appeared. Contractors submitted inflated invoices. Agency officials approved them. Funds moved through intermediary companies. Then portions of the money quietly returned through hidden financial channels. Everything was layered, everything was disguised, and for years, nobody had noticed, or perhaps worse. Some people had noticed and chosen to stay silent. At a secure FBI field office outside Dallas, investigators assembled a task force combining financial analysts, cyber specialists, and public corruption agents. Their goal was simple: follow the money. For months, agents worked in complete secrecy. Subpoenas were issued quietly. Bank records were reviewed. Encrypted communications were analyzed. The evidence continued growing. Then investigators made a critical discovery. One consulting company receiving millions in state payments operated from a nearly empty office suite in Houston. Surveillance teams were dispatched immediately. What they observed raised even more concerns. Employees rarely visited the office. Most activity happened late at night. And several visitors arriving at the building worked directly for the state agency under investigation. Federal agents soon uncovered hidden connections between agency officials and multiple private contractors. Personal financial transfers, luxury property purchases, undisclosed travel records. One senior agency director had purchased a $4.8 million waterfront property only months after approving a series of emergency state contracts. Another official appeared connected to offshore accounts in Belize and Cyprus. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. This wasn't isolated corruption. Investigators believed they were looking at an organized financial network operating inside a government institution. Then came the encrypted hard drive. During a quiet surveillance operation outside Austin, agents observed a state employee transferring several storage cases from the agency office into a private vehicle after midnight. Federal authorities obtained an emergency warrant. The vehicle was stopped less than an hour later. Inside the cases, investigators discovered financial records, encrypted laptops, and a hard drive labeled only with one word: ledger. The contents of that drive would change the entire investigation. Inside were thousands of internal documents, private communications, payment schedules, contract approvals, and hidden spreadsheets tracking financial distributions connected to public infrastructure contracts. But one file immediately drew attention: a spreadsheet titled Priority. It listed names, badge numbers, approval dates, and monthly payment amounts. According to investigators, more than 23 individuals connected to the agency appeared in the records. Several had received regular payments disguised as consulting fees. Others appeared tied to luxury purchases and offshore transfers. The corruption network stretched far beyond a single office. Federal agents realized the investigation had reached a critical point. If suspects became aware of the case, evidence could disappear overnight. The operation moved into its final phase. At 4:10 a.m. the following Tuesday, federal command vehicles assembled outside multiple locations across Texas. Search warrants had been approved for the state agency headquarters in Austin, 3 contractor offices in Houston, a financial consulting firm in Dallas, a records facility outside Fort Worth, and 2 private residences connected to senior agency officials. More than 600 federal personnel participated in the operation: cyber teams, financial crime investigators, public corruption specialists, tactical support units. Every target would be hit simultaneously. At exactly 6 a.m., the raids began. Inside the state agency headquarters, agents immediately secured executive offices and financial records departments. Employees arriving for work watched in shock as federal investigators carried boxes of evidence through the lobby. Entire server rooms were disconnected. Computer systems were imaged on-site. Dozens of phones were seized. Meanwhile, agents at the Houston contractor offices uncovered rooms filled with archived project documents and hidden financial ledgers. At one location, investigators discovered stacks of unsigned state approval forms already prepared for future contracts. But the most important discovery came from the Dallas Financial Consulting Office. Behind a locked conference room wall, agents found a concealed records vault containing years of internal communications and transaction histories. One investigator later described the room as the control center. According to federal officials, the documents connected public officials, private contractors, and financial intermediaries into a coordinated approval system designed to move public money through layers of legitimate-looking transactions. The operation stunned the public. News helicopters circled above the agency headquarters all morning. By afternoon, major media outlets across the country were reporting on the investigation. Questions spread rapidly. How long had this been happening? Who else was involved? How much public money had disappeared? Federal investigators remained careful with public statements. But privately, the scale of the operation was becoming clear. Over the next several days, analysts reviewed millions of financial records recovered during the raids. The numbers were staggering. According to investigators, more than $312 million in public infrastructure funding had been connected to suspicious transfers over a 5-year period. Some projects existed only partially, others appeared completely fabricated. Several emergency repair programs had received funding despite showing no evidence of actual construction activity. The corruption network had relied on one thing above all else: complexity. The transactions were intentionally difficult to trace. Money moved through multiple accounts. Contracts passed through layers of approvals. Records were spread across different departments and companies. No single document revealed the full picture, but once investigators combined everything together, the structure became visible. And at the center of that structure sat one name: Daniel Mercer, Deputy Director of Infrastructure Operations. Publicly, Mercer was respected throughout the state government system. He frequently appeared at transportation conferences. He oversaw major public projects. He had spent nearly 2 decades building a reputation as a trusted administrator. According to investigators, he had also quietly helped coordinate one of the largest public corruption schemes the agency had ever faced. Federal surveillance showed Mercer meeting privately with contractors tied to suspicious payments. Financial records linked him to multiple shell corporations, and encrypted communications recovered during the raids appeared to place him at the center of the approval network. At 8:42 p.m., federal agents arrived at Mercer's private residence outside Austin. He was taken into custody without incident. But even after the arrests began, investigators warned the operation was far from over. Because the investigation revealed something deeply troubling, the corruption had not relied on threats or violence. It relied on paperwork, approvals, electronic signatures, routine processes. For years, millions of dollars moved quietly through systems designed to appear ordinary, and that made the operation difficult to detect. In the weeks that followed, additional arrests were announced. Contractors, financial consultants, agency employees. Several individuals agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors. Authorities also seized multiple luxury properties, financial accounts, and business assets connected to the investigation. Yet investigators continued asking one disturbing question: how many similar systems were still operating unnoticed? Because according to federal analysts, the biggest danger wasn't just the money that disappeared. It was how normal the corruption appeared from the outside. The agency building eventually reopened. Employees returned to work. Public operations resumed. From the street, the headquarters looked exactly the same. Cars entered the parking garage. Workers passed through security checkpoints. Meetings continued inside conference rooms. But behind the scenes, investigators knew something had changed forever. A hidden financial network had been exposed. An entire system built on secrecy had collapsed, and one routine audit had uncovered years of corruption hiding in plain sight. Because sometimes the most dangerous operations aren't hidden underground. Sometimes they're hidden inside ordinary offices, behind official titles, signatures, and people trusted to protect the system itself. And federal investigators believe that lesson may be far bigger than this single case alone.